I never buy soft drinks or coffees when I'm out of the house. I take a big thing of water with me. I take a thermos of coffee or tea or whatever I feel like drinking with me. I don't buy a soda with my meal. It costs the restaurant a few cents to fill up a fountain soda. And yet they'll charge you $3, $4, $5 for a soda. Like, you're wasting your money there. For 10 years, my wife and daughter and I lived overseas, and we lived an upper middle class lifestyle on a pretty modest budget. I mean, we lived almost entirely on my wife's salary, and she's a school counselor, or at least she was when we were living overseas. So, I mean, she was earning 45 grand a year, 50 grand a year, and we were living entirely on her salary and benefits, which were very advantageous, which I'll talk about more in a minute. But we just a few months ago moved back to the States, and we still have we have gone out of our way to continue living an upper middle class lifestyle on a still a pretty modest budget, not as modest as it was when we were living overseas, but there are ways to stretch dollars further and live a very, very high quality of life without spending a fortune, without spending the same amount that the typical person in the upper middle class spends as a living budget every year. So, Denny, I'm glad to have you with me. And let's dive right in. So the simplest answer for how to live an upper middle class lifestyle on a middle class income or budget is to move overseas, right? I mean, like, that's not a very satisfying answer to most people. Most people don't want to just get up and uproot and move to a new country. I can tell you it's a lot of fun. It's much easier than you think it is. And you get to have lots of adventures and travel and, new cultural experiences and delicious food. And, in South America, where we lived for the last 6 years,
there are ways to find free living in the US. For instance, I used to manage apartments, and my lead maintenance man got a free apartment. So there are ways. If
there
you're
are ways.
creative.
Yeah, absolutely. And we should talk about housing. We should dig into that as well, because one of the things that made this a lot easier for us when we were living overseas was we got free furnished housing through my wife's employer. She was working for international schools, and they provided us with free upscale furnished housing. It was great. That is no longer the case as we moved back to the States. But like you mentioned, Denny, there are plenty of ways to score free housing or get reduced housing here in the US. One of them is, of course, through an employer, like you just mentioned. Some jobs do offer free housing. You were talking about a building manager, basically. That is one of those jobs that offers free housing, even here in the States. So those jobs are out there. You can house hack, of course. You can get into that conversation about, is that an upper middle class lifestyle if you're, living in a duplex next to your tenant? And it can be. I mean, I've seen some really, really high end small multifamily properties, with
Oh, yeah.
2 units, 3 units, 4
There
units,
are
whatever.
other ways to house hack, though. I mean, I took in an exchange student. It was a great experience, and it almost paid my entire mortgage. So there are ways.
Yeah, there are ways to do it. I mean, so I have a good friend who runs a couple of Airbnb properties here in Baltimore. Anyway, he got grandfathered in for one of his properties, earns a fortune on it because he has almost no competition, right? And then the other loophole that he found for Airbnb in Baltimore is you can rent out your primary residence. Well, they lived in a property for a few years as their primary residence, and then they rented an apartment up the road, and now they just rent out that house on Airbnb, earn an absolute fortune from it every month, way more than the cost of both the mortgage and maintenance costs for that property and the rent on their apartment. So, they are still earning thousands of dollars a month, even after paying all of the expenses for the house and their rent on the apartment where they are living as technically not their primary residence, right? So, point being, there's a lot of different ways you can do this. Look, when my wife and I moved back to the States a few months ago, we aggressively negotiated our rent. So, I mean, I used to be a landlord. I used to own 15 plus rental properties. And so I know that landlords, a lot of them, yes, they want higher rent, of course, but a lot of them have higher priorities beyond the rent, right? They want consistency, they want reliability, they want minimal damage to the property and minimal wear and tear. And they like cash up front, like everybody. So, I just reached out to, every landlord that had a property that we thought was a good fit for us. I would reach out to them and be like, hey, my wife and I both have credit scores in the mid 700s. We don't have any pets, and we are willing to prepay 6 months worth of rent if you will accept this rent amount that was 5 to 10% less than the asking rent. And a lot of them turned us down. You don't need every one of them to take you up on it. You just need one, right?
Yes.
So we did. So we scored a great deal on rent. That the average person isn't getting. I mean, we're saving hundreds of dollars a month. There are ways to stretch these dollars further without. And we have an awesome house. I love our house that we're renting for at least this first year. We might buy at the end of this lease. Who knows? But these are the things that help you live a higher quality of life than your budget. All right. Utilities. This is a small one, but I was writing a piece just yesterday for Bigger Pockets on this very topic, and I did put out a call for quotes from experts, and I wish I had the guy's name in front of me right now, but his quote was along the lines of, if you want to live an upper middle class lifestyle on a middle class budget, you have to save on the small things to let you have those big things that give you that upper middle class lifestyle, right? Like the housing that you want, maybe the transportation that you want, the travel that you want. Those are the big things that make up that upper middle class lifestyle. So you got to cut back on the small things. Like, don't waste money on the small things, basically, was his point. So,
Absolutely.
we just turned our heat on a couple of days ago, actually, in our house. And the thermostat is set to like 66, 67. And we just wear sweaters, right, in the house. And that's fine.
I
Instead of wearing.
remember as a child, my father running around screaming, "Use covers!"
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so instead of wearing shorts after I get out of the shower at night, I wear pajama pants, right? I mean, so what? Here's another little thing. So fountain soda, just to again, it costs the restaurant a few cents to fill up a fountain soda, and yet they'll charge you, $3, $4, $5 for a soda, right? Like, you're wasting your money there. And likewise with coffee. I mean, coffee is.
My goodness, I
Yeah.
didn't realize till I decided to stop buying coffee out and start making it. And I did not realize the amount of money I was spending at Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts. It was, eye-opening, and no more. I don't do it anymore.
Yeah, it's easy to blow $50 to $100 a month on just soft drinks out, coffees, teas, sodas, that sort of thing, out and about. And it's money that you don't even think about spending. That could be $100 a month, literally. I mean, and these are things that could be going towards great travel, adventure travel, could be going towards driving a nicer car or living in a nicer home. The things that actually make up that more upper middle class lifestyle, instead of just thoughtlessly spending on a $5 latte or a $5 soda at a restaurant, right? So don't do that. Like, cut that and save money on the little things so you can put them towards the big things. All right, cooking. I'm a big proponent of this. So I love cooking. I enjoy. My wife doesn't really like cooking that much, but it's a great hobby because it saves you a lot of money if you know how to cook and you enjoy it, and you can create, food you really love eating. Whether you want to throw around words like gourmet or whatever. You don't have to get pretentious about it, like I sometimes do. But if you know how to cook, you can have these upscale experiences at home or at your friend's home. I mean, so our best friends are another couple who are also foodies, and they love great wine like we do. And, we do occasionally go out with them to a fancy restaurant and drop outrageous sums of money. We went out with them a few weeks ago and spent almost $700 per couple on a dinner, which is crazy. But, again, that's that upper middle class lifestyle. We don't do it very often. Most of the time, we will make a 4, 5, 6 course meal at one of our homes, and we will pair great wines with it. The kind of wines that if you were buying them at a restaurant would be prohibitively expensive, but they're not if you buy them at a bulk discount or at the retail store. So you can have those gourmet meals, and a lot more of them if you know how to cook them. Is the point. So it's a great hobby to
What
have.
about if you don't?
If you don't, then I hope you enjoy eating pizza and hot dogs. I mean, look, I mean, You can go out to dinner more. It's just going to cost you a lot more money. And, that just is what it is.
And there's still things you can do if you don't like cooking or you can't cook. There are things that you can get that's still a lot less expensive than going out.
That is absolutely true. And, social events, where you're doing parties or events like that, the more that you can do BYOB events rather than going to a bar, going to a restaurant, going to some kind of commercial establishment where you're paying for someone else's profit, that is better. I mean, so when we lived in Abu Dhabi, we used to do beach bonfires with our friends, and it was great. So we would take a big picnic out there with good food, good beverages. But we were hanging out on the beach, having a big bonfire, and we would be sitting there sipping high-end wines or whatever it was that and eating good food, but we weren't paying for someone else's profit margin at a restaurant or at a bar, right? So just getting a little bit more creative with that stuff. So shop sales, shop secondhand, creatively. You don't want to dress. You don't want people to tell that you're dressed wearing thrift store clothes, right? I mean, that's the whole point of thrift stores is that you can find. So literally, the last shirt that I bought, it was an $80 Vineyard Vines shirt that I bought for $9 at a thrift store in my neighborhood that I just ducked into because my daughter saw something in the window that she was curious about. So I was like, yeah, I guess we can walk in there for 5 minutes. And she's running around playing with like the 9-inch pink high heels or whatever. She's 5. And I was like, I'll just glance at the men's rack. And then there was this Vineyard Vines shirt that was in perfect condition and still quite fashionable. And I looked at the price tag. I was like, oh, that's a $9 for an $80 shirt. So I was like, and that fits me perfectly. I will buy this. And then I literally wore that a few days later to my friend's country club. And I was dressed better than most of the members at that country club wearing a $9 shirt. So, same thing at the grocery store. I mean, we got spoiled with low or cheap beef and steaks when we lived in South America. In South America, beef is way cheaper than it is here in the States. So, I mean, we would buy filet mignon, and it was not very expensive in Peru or Brazil, where we lived last. Here, filet mignon is really expensive. But, when you go to the grocery store, every time I'm at the grocery store, I just check the steak aisle to see if any of those better cuts here, New York strip or ribeye or filet mignon, are on a 50% off sale, because sometimes they need to move them within the next day or two because they're going to expire. So if I see them on a 50% off sale, I'll just grab them and throw them in the freezer. And then I have my steaks at South American prices, right? Like, so my wife and I still get to eat filet mignon, and we paid South American prices for it living here in the US. So there's a lot of this kind of stuff that you can do if you're willing to just put that extra layer of thought into it. Used cars, if you can buy a luxury car that's 3, 4, 5 years old for the same cost that you would buy a cheaper new car for, right? And no one other than a car expert will be able to call out the model year on a car, right?
You know what? My father never, and he had a successful large business and everything, he could have, but he never would buy a new car. His whole thing is that you lose money as soon as you drive that. We heard that 100 million times. As soon as you drive it off the lot, boom.
Well,
And I
right.
adopted that same mentality, and I will not buy a brand new car.
He was absolutely right. Yeah. So, when we moved back a few months ago, we bought a 2023 car, and it's not a fancy car, but no one can tell the difference between a 2023 model and a 2025 model. Now, cars get to be 10, 12 years old, and you can tell, right? They do start looking like an older car. But a few years old, 3 to 5 years old, no one can tell that it is not a new car. So, you could go buy a BMW if you want, or whatever a luxury car is calling your name, Lexus, Acura, whatever. And, buy a used one that's a few years old. No one will be able to tell. I mean, especially after 6 months go by. So, that is one thing that you can do. My wife and I, we didn't own a car, or we didn't have a car when we lived in South America. We had no car. We walked everywhere. We biked. We rode scooters. We took Ubers. So when we moved back to the States, we were like, well, can we get away with sharing one car? Because, in the States, you do have to drive more places. I mean, the whole country is basically built on driving everywhere. So we bought one car, we share it, and it has been way easier than I thought it was going to be. I thought we were going to be constantly like bickering over the car or having these conflicts. We've probably had
It isn't just saving the car payment, it's saving in car insurance, parking,
maintenance
because
and repairs, gas.
somewhere you're going to be paying for parking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and in fact, so AAA puts out a study every year that about the annual cost of ownership for a new car, and the average is over $12,000 a year, so over $1,000 a month. And that includes, that's not, like you said, Danny, it's not just the car payment, it's insurance, it's gas, it's maintenance and repairs. So cars are expensive. If you can get away with sharing one, do it. So my wife and I, yeah, we've had probably 2 conflicts over the car in over 4 months. Times when we both would have preferred to have had the car. And then we just worked it out, right? Like we just said, all right, well, you go ahead and take it tonight. I'll go do this other thing tomorrow, like whatever. And it's fine. You can be a grown up and work that stuff out. All right. Flexible travel. So it was almost 10 years ago. It was 2016, the first time that my wife and I used Skyscanner's everywhere search feature. Bulgaria popped up. We were living in Abu Dhabi at the time, and a nonstop flight to Bulgaria popped up as a really cheap option when we did the everywhere search. And we were like, Bulgaria, like what's in Bulgaria? Like, what's there to do and see there? So we spent 3 minutes doing a quick Google search. We're like, this looks awesome. Let's go. Let's do it. So we did. We spent a week in Bulgaria for Katie's spring break that year, and it was great. We fell in love with Eastern Europe, and we have spent months in Eastern Europe since then. I mean, one summer we lived there for a month. We've gone back repeatedly for 1 or 2 week trips at a time. We love it. It's affordable. It's beautiful. The people are friendly. They're not sick of tourists the way that a lot of people in Western and Southern Europe are. So the point just being, if you are more flexible in your travel, instead of getting locked into one idea of like, we have to do this trip at this time, you can save a lot of money and do more travel. You can do higher end travel. You can stay at better places, or whatever it is.
You can also use credit card points.
That's true as well. That is absolutely true. And it also helps to go visit places in the shoulder season rather than the high season. So, for example, I love going to beach towns in September because not all the kids are gone, right? So that you don't have the screaming kids running around and throwing sand and kicking sand all over you. But the weather is still warm. You can still hang out on the beach. You can still get in the water. The water is warm. After the full summer of the sun beating on the water's still warm. So you can go have a perfect beach experience in September at half the cost, right? And that these are examples of how if you are a little bit more flexible with your travel, you can do more of it, and you can do more high-end travel. Staying in better places. Going. So accommodations will cut down their rates really low in the shoulder season. Restaurants will offer way better specials in the shoulder season. So be flexible in both where you go and when you go there. All right, let's talk about investments for 1 second. Since Denny, you and I do come from a real estate investing background, this wouldn't be a Bucks Outside the Box episode if we didn't touch on investments. That also helps, right? Like it helps to live an upper middle class lifestyle if you have some passive income coming in. And it's not just from the dollars and cents and the cash flow of that. Mentally, emotionally, you feel more free to take some of those travel experiences that maybe you would feel a little like pinched about taking otherwise. If you're like, what, I've got dividends that will cover this entire trip this month. An example that I gave a few months ago, Denny, you probably remember this. I took my daughter to the Amazon in May with another family, who she was friends with the kid, and I was friends with the parents. So we went to the Amazon for a weekend, and that whole trip was covered entirely by passive income from investments, real estate investments that you and I made in the Co-Investing Club, Denny. So for anyone who's not familiar, Denny and I organize an investment club. It's called the Co-Investing Club. And every month we meet on the big Zoom meeting, and we vet a passive real estate investment together, and then we'll go in on it together. A lot of them earn very high yields. Others are more growth oriented. But having those investments making you money while you sleep or while you're traveling, that all helps with living a higher quality lifestyle, um, while still
So
building wealth.
build your wealth for later.
Um, all right, Denny, anything you want to add before we call this episode complete?
Be creative. That's so important. I mean, the more creative you are, the more things you can do with the least amount of money.
Yeah, and I'll give one final example just to illustrate this. Um, I we mentioned that I love cooking. We were at a high-end Italian deli the other day, or a month or two back, and I saw a can of escargot, and they're snails, and I love escargot, as does my wife. Um, so I made escargot as an appetizer dish, and it was super cheap to make, but it's very fancy. It's a high end thing. If you go to a restaurant and you order escargot, you're going to spend money on it. This can, it was $12 for like 120 escargot.
Yes, but was the can as good as?
It was yeah, it was great. And then the way you prepare it is just basically in garlic and herb butter. I mean, so with like a loaf of sourdough bread is how I served it. So I mean, super easy to prepare. I mean, I just threw it in a baking dish with butter and herbs and garlic. And of that 120 escargot, I probably used 30 of them. So the other ones are sitting in my freezer, and I'm gonna take them to the next high end multi-course dinner that a friend of ours hosts. So I'm gonna roll in there and have spent like $5 basically on the ingredients. I'll take some of those escargot, and I'm gonna wow everybody with this exotic dish that I brought that's super rich and buttery and expensive if you go and get it anywhere else. But because I made it myself, the thing's probably going to cost me $5 total in ingredients to wow all those people when they're spending way more than that on whatever dishes they're cooking, steak or whatever. So anyway,
So if any of your friends are watching, they now knew the secret.
now they know my secret, and now they know I'm a cheapskate. No, they already know that. Anyway, Denny, always a pleasure getting together with you to do these. Guys, if you got something out of this episode, fresh perspective, please rate, review the show, follow us, pass it on to friends, family members, whoever who might get a kick out of it. And if you're new to the idea of passive real estate investing, like I said, Denny and I, we do this every month, with an investment club of people. That club is open to the public now. So if you're curious about it, if you don't know how that works, we have a free course on that, sparkfunnel.com/free. 8 episodes. They're all super short and sweet, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So check that out, and we will catch you on the flip side.
Yes.